Hello and welcome. As you can tell by the title, I'm the obsessed movie man, O.M.M. What can I say? I love Dracula. I admit that there are some adaptations that I have not seen, but for the most part, I have seen as many as I could get my hands on. Dracula 1979, Bram Stoker's Dracula, Count Dracula 1970, and Dracula movies that don't even have to do with the books, such as the Hammer series, Monster Squad, and even Van Helsing. It's safe to say that not all of them are great, but they have a certain charm, a hypnotic spell, if you will, that draws the viewer towards the many incarnations of the Count. And today, we're going to discuss one of the most accurate of the adaptations, Dracula 1977. This was a made-for-television movie for the BBC channel, and it starred Louis Jordan as Dracula and Frank Finlay as Van Helsing. For those who are not aware of the premise, the story starts with English solicitor Jonathan Harker traveling to Transylvania to meet his client Count Dracula, who is purchasing a number of houses in England. Harker arrives at Castle Dracula and meets the charismatic Count. For the most part, he seems like an odd but still polite host. However, strange things transpire in the house. Dracula can't be seen in a mirror, certain doors are locked, he feeds a baby to three beautiful women, and so forth. That is just the first act, and it is by far the strongest. It takes its time to build up suspense, it lets the atmosphere set in, and it all takes place in a strange environment. The audience, in a sense, is Harker, and we see what he sees, and we find ourselves thinking, what would I do if I were in this situation? Out of all the Dracula movies, this one seems to understand how strong this part of the story is, and it makes this scenario as horrific as it could possibly be. Harker starts losing his composure, but Dracula remains as refined as he has been throughout the beginning. Let's talk about Dracula for a minute. When people think of Dracula, they generally picture the Bela Lugosi depiction. While Mr. Lugosi is my favorite incarnation of the character, I don't think he is the best representation of Dracula from the novel. This has nothing to do with Mr. Lugosi's performance. I'm basing it off on how Dracula is written and how faithful he is to his novelization form. With that in mind, I would have to say that Louis Jordan portrays Dracula exactly how I pictured him in the book. What do I like about him? Well, this sounds simple, but I like the way he smiles. It's a typical smile, but whatever situation Dracula is in, the smile fits perfectly. There's a scene when Harker discovers Dracula sleeping in a coffin. Dracula shows that simple smile and it conveys how evil and terrifying he is. Another thing I like is his voice. It's just like the novel described. Saying in excellent English but with a strange intonation, it doesn't sound like a stereotypical vampire accent, it legitimately sounds like someone from a foreign country speaking English. The only thing lacking is a bit of rage. Dracula has always been portrayed as a civilized but monstrous man, but here they don't really show any scenes of him in a fit of anger. Other than that, I really love this performance. Of course he's no Bela Lugosi or Christopher Lee, but I'd say Mr. Jordan is up there in the top 5. Let's face it, you just can't mess with the villain from Octopussy. Other performances that should be worth noticing would be Frank Finlay as Van Helsing and Jack Shephard as Renfield. Again, it's hard to pick the best Van Helsing. Edward Van Sloan was a crafty yet quiet man, Peter Cushing was more straightforward and firm, but Finlay seems to have combined the aspects of the other two actors and presents a perfect portrayal of Van Helsing. However, that's not to say he's my favorite. I still prefer Cushing's portrayal, but what I'm getting at is that Finlay, again, is the best representation of who Van Helsing was in the book. The same thing can be said for Renfield. Yes, of course, I prefer Dwight Frye, but when I compare the two actors, I notice something. I see Dwight Frye acting like a stereotypical madman. When I see Jack Shephard, I see someone who I can believe is really mentally ill. Mr. Shephard places a lot of emphasis on body language and posture. He can be found rolling around on the floor or crawling or hunched over. I particularly love the scene with him and Mina talking about the concept of the soul. That was really fascinating. The set designs are very impressive too. Whenever I watch a Dracula movie, I always look forward to seeing how old and decaying the castle looks, and this film doesn't disappoint when it comes to that. The graveyards are cool as well, and so is the Westenra House, and Stewart's Insane Asylum, and so forth. As much as I am praising this movie, there are some minor things that irked me a bit. For example, sometimes an extreme close-up of Dracula would be shown, but in an X-ray style lighting. It just comes and goes throughout the film. My guess is that it's reminding us of Dracula's presence, or it's supposed to give us a sense of dread, But there are other scenes where the film just randomly changes to a red filter or black and white. It's a bit more distracting than it is frightening. Now we come to the segment of the show where I nitpick this movie to death for its deviations from the novel. 1. Dracula doesn't start off as an old man and then turn into a young man. In this, he's youthful the entire movie. 2. Mina and Lucy are sisters. 3. Arthur Holmwood and Quincy Morris are combined into one character, Quincy Holmwood. 4. In this movie, Van Helsing stakes Dracula instead of Harker slitting his throat and Quincy stabbing him. And 5. Quincy lives. There, not a whole lot of differences, but they are significant ones to die-hard Dracula fans. I guess I can excuse the combination of Arthur and Quincy, considering they both don't really have much of a personality, but it still would have been nice to see them as two different people, which was what Bram Stoker's Dracula did, but we'll get to that movie another time. The glaring thing to me is, why the heck are Mina and Lucy sisters? I don't see the point of it. I can, however, see the reasoning of making Van Helsing be the one to off Dracula. Van Helsing is the hero, Dracula is the villain, and we want to see the hero who started this crusade to defeat evil actually defeat evil. Well, I've talked about the pros and cons of this movie, so overall, what do I think? It's good. It's really good. The acting from pretty much all the cast members is excellent, the sets are gothic and eerie, and the story works and flows at a perfect pace. The one downside to owning the DVD itself is that there is a long series of commercials that one cannot skip. Of course, you could use that time to get a bottle of soda or pop some popcorn or you could just watch some good old-fashioned British commercials. Your call. That was an O.M.M review. Thanks for watching, and tune in for more movie reviews. Thank you.